Welcome, Buff fans, to our game preview. Adam, it's time. We got to figure out what's going to happen with the Buffs and Kansas State Wildcats on Saturday. 8:15 p.m. kickoff. We hope it kicks off on time. Usually that means
Yeah.
8:30 on ESPN, but it's going to be a rocking Folsom Field. I know that.
Well, all those years in the Pac-12 have conditioned us physically and mentally for that brutal late night, and it's never easy. I even the folks that just want to tune in on their couch, especially if you're on the East Coast, it's tough.
Yeah.
I saw Coach Prime again, kind of going against this start time, saying it's the stupidest thing ever. I agree with him, but there is a reason for it. There are
Right.
a lot of bars that are going to have the Colorado football game on because it's kind of the marquee game at that time. So there are some benefits from a television standpoint, but it certainly wears on you when you, especially for us, we're going to be up, I don't know, 6 in the morning probably working,
Yeah.
but it beats working for a living, I suppose.
It does, but I will say that obviously Colorado's last game at UCF was on the East Coast, and I do have sympathy now. When you're sitting there on the East Coast and you're in the hotel and it's like midnight and you got football on. It's like they're not even at halftime yet of a
Yeah.
couple of these games. I feel for those people on the East Coast that that have to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the end of this game. And but there's
This is
like you
going to be
said,
one that's worth staying up for, though, I feel
right,
like.
right, right, right. Yeah, and like you said, there's a reason for it. I know. I don't think Buff fans are quite ready for Big 12 after dark, but we have it.
Yeah, if it's the only one that kicks off at 8:15 or 8:30 this year, then I'll feel good about that. So you got to put in your time, but no, this is one of those games where if you got to make a cup of coffee at 9 o'clock just to make your way through it, I think it's going to be worth it because these are two high quality football teams that are going to be going at it.
Yeah, and I'd also advise, a nap around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that. Something that I wish I could do this Saturday, but I got baseball and all this stuff. But anyway, we'll figure it out. We don't need to complain about our schedules for this week. But Adam, what do you think? This game is obviously a big one for the Buffs, and it's I don't even think probably. I mean, I think it's the biggest game under Coach Prime at this point, the biggest opportunity for Coach Prime. It's the biggest game for the Buffs in a number of years.
Yeah, when you have that ranked component for Kansas State and
Hmm.
knowing what a win would do just from, really kind of catapulting you into the rest of the conference schedule. This is maybe, and you could put Utah in that discussion, Brian, I think, as tough a game as the Buffaloes are going to face the rest of the season.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, especially the way Oklahoma State's playing right now. I mean, I would have put Oklahoma State in that category. Um, I still don't want to totally write off the Cowboys, but the way they're playing right now, certainly it looks like this one and Utah, as long as they have Cam Rising, it's probably these two games.
Yeah, I mean, in at Arizona next week is going to be no picnic,
Right.
especially if Fafita and McMillan are doing their thing, and yeah, that's very much a Jekyll and Hyde football team.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for Colorado to make a big statement. This is especially coming off the UCF game. It's like, can you replicate what you guys did down there and be this
Mhm.
consistent team? Because that was the performance that I think everybody was waiting to see out of this football team. So now you've seen it. You've had this bye week. Can you keep the momentum going? There's maybe some concern. Maybe when you come off a win like that, you don't necessarily want to go into a bye week. But I still feel like the timing of it was pretty good. And Kansas State, same thing, had a bye week as well. So there's no advantage or disadvantage from that standpoint. But this is like NDSU, a better version of that, right? Because that's where Chris Kleiman came from. And they're a program that's built on running the football and stopping the run, and they're good at those two things.
Yeah.
The thing that talking with Kansas State folks this week that stood out to me from being bullish on Colorado's chances even more so in this game is just the fact that Kansas State's not been very good away from home this season. They
Right.
almost lost to Tulsa on the road, and we saw what happened in that BYU game. Things really spiraled quickly on them, and they got blown out in that football game. And Avery Johnson looked like a deer in the headlights at points in that BYU game. He's a sophomore. He's really really talented.
Yeah.
But if the Folsom Field frenzy is there on Saturday night, and I think it will be those late kickoffs. We've seen some fun environments in Folsom Field. This is going to be a tough environment for Kansas State and their sophomore quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And K-State's actually lost three consecutive games coming off of a bye. So it's not like the bye coming off the bye is not always an advantage. The Buffs obviously last year lost coming off the bye as well. They had won the previous 3 years, but yeah, coming off that bye, it's not that inherent advantage. I think it's just how you handle it, and we'll see how the Buffs do. But I will say, Adam, I actually went back and watched the UCF game again last night, and the thing that stuck out to me every time I've seen it, but is there was nothing fluky about that game, and there were so many
Yeah.
things that I watched out of CU that I'm like, there's no reason why they can't play like this every Saturday, and it was the way they were physical and the way they were flying to the ball. There's no reason they can't keep doing that. And I'm sure that that's the message from, Coach Prime and that staff is like, guys, look what you just did. You can do this every single Saturday. And obviously K-State's going to be a different task than UCF, but UCF's no slouch, and that's a team that could run the ball and you were able to stop the run. That's a team that you were able to run the ball on. You could throw the ball on. So that's what I think. If you're a Buff fan, and for us covering this, I watched it. I'm like, there's something here. I mean, the Buffs hit on something against UCF, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to your point, it's the saltiness of this Colorado defense that we're
Yeah,
seeing. And I can't remember the last time, Brian, that I looked at a Colorado defense and didn't think, well, there's the weakness right here. And that saying goes that you're only as good as your weakest link. And a lot of times opposing teams through the past 20 years have been able to kind of find and exploit that weakness in Colorado's defense. I don't really feel
yeah.
like that group has that, especially with the defensive line rotation really showing to be as good as we expected, and the
Mhm.
linebackers playing at a borderline all conference level. And now you get Shiloh Sanders on the back end back, and so Carter Stoutmeyer now becomes a depth piece that you can put in different packages. So it's a unit that you can tell loves playing for their defense coordinator, and they're trusting each other, and that's something that we've heard from Robert Livingston in terms of things that they've done that have improved early on this season. Is that they know, because there is talent around them, as an individual on Colorado's defense right now, I don't have to do more than my job. And I think that's something that has been pretty rare covering this Colorado program for so
Yeah.
many years.
Yeah, I agree with you. And speaking of depth, I think one other guy that really popped off, again, as I was watching it last night, was Jaylen Wester. And we've talked
Yeah.
so much about Nikai Hill Green and Levanta Bentley, how well they're playing. And man, that's a great duo. But Jaylen Wester gets in there, and he was an animal. I mean, he was all over the ball that night. And so I think that's a guy that has to have some confidence, and I'm sure the coaches have confidence in him now that you feel like, all right, we can plug Jaylen Wester in there too. So there's a lot of guys that are gaining some confidence, and we've talked about it this week because we talked to the edge guys, but no Deion Hayes in that game. But you have the edge was those guys were awesome in that game.
Yeah.
Whether it was Okunlola or Taj McCoy, BJ Green, Arden Walker. I mean, there were several of them that stepped up. So. Uh, the depth to me is the most impressive thing about that defense right now. And it may not be three deep, but you feel really good about the two deep in a lot of spots.
Yeah, no question. They're going to have a test on Saturday. I mean, this is probably, I think UCF is still number one in terms of rushing offense in the Big 12 over Kansas State. But when you look at the averages and what DJ Giddens is doing, averaging what is it,
Mhm.
7.9 yards per carry. Even Avery Johnson,
Right.
7.9 yards per carry. So they're real dangerous. Obviously, everybody watching this is aware of Dylan Edwards and what he can do in situational moments. So you hear the word litmus test game. I think for this defense, especially, we think that their run defense is really good. If they do it this week against Kansas State, then you could
Yeah.
almost make the argument that they're a great unit against that. But we got to see it, I think, one more time against a talented group to say that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And is there a number you look at and say, yeah, if they keep him under this, then this run defense is legit?
Probably not because UCF put up a bunch of yards rushing the ball in
Yeah,
garbage time. So that number looks a little bit off. But yeah, keep them under 200 yards and win the football game. And I don't think anybody's complaining, right? In
right.
terms of their rushing offense. But, what are they averaging? About 170, something like that?
Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's a good number. I know that. It's
Yeah.
not, and
This,
it's not what UCF was averaging for sure. They were averaging like 375, but
but this is one of those games, I guess, to a larger picture, is that just find a way to have one more point at the end of the game.
right. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't really matter how it looks, but I think for me, when I watch what the Buffs are doing, not only UCF, but at times in Baylor, and I know they sort of they needed a miracle to pull that one out, but they looked good in a lot of ways in that Baylor game. They looked really good against CSU. They're hitting on something, and they're starting to hit their stride, and so that's what gives me the most confidence about this team right now is that there's nothing fluky about what they're doing, and sometimes you see those games of like a team ha they have a big win. But it's like, well, yeah, but it's because they got this break and this break and that break, and Colorado just made a lot of breaks against UCF because they played so well, and so I think that's where I have the most confidence. But I think this is going to be the best football game of the year so far. I think it's going to be a really good game where K-State they're going to hit their things as well because they're pretty good.
Mm-hmm. They are, but they need to be up or in this game early. If Colorado gets out to a big lead, then all of a sudden you're asking Kansas State to do what they don't want to do because
Yeah.
uh, they don't have a dangerous passing game. That is the one part of this program that
Hmm.
Chris Kleiman has not been able to really, build up here in 2024. So that's a key to this game is getting out to a good start, maybe making Kansas State do some things offensively they don't want to do.
And that's how they're, at least to me, a little bit similar to UCF, is that, UCF's not built for, coming back from a big deficit. I don't think K-State is right now either, because if you're able to pin your ears back and get after Avery Johnson, he struggles a little bit under that pressure. So I think that, yeah, the Buffs need a strong start. We saw them not have a strong start at UCF, and they still, won that football game pretty easily. So, but the Buffs need to kind of stay in the lead throughout the night.
Yeah, well, yeah, the Colorado has, to your point, I guess, been a better team as the game has gone along, especially early in the season. But yeah, just making Kansas State out of their game plan, I think, is going to be a key. But yeah, it should be wildly entertaining. To your point, it'll be good to be back in Folsom Field and not have to drop about 20 pounds of water weight after the game from the humidity. I'm still talking about that humidity, by the way, Brian.
Well, we can move on from that, Adam. I know you're scarred, but we can move on from that. um, but yeah, you're right. I'm looking forward to not having that as well. It should be a nice evening out there. But offensively, um, defensively, we know they got to stop the run. They got to slow that down, and they got to, make Avery Johnson try to beat him as a passer. But offensively, what do you think the keys are?
Well, you try to stay balanced, but Kansas State's strength is probably their run defense, right? And
Yeah.
they're pretty decent at getting after the passer. They're not ranking in high nationally in that category, but yeah, I think balance and you just seeing Pat Shermer continue to be innovative and throw some things out there that the defense isn't expecting. I think will be a key. But I expect Colorado to be able to put up some points in this game. I don't know if it's going to turn into an old school Big 12 shootout because I think again both defenses are pretty solid. But you should be able to get some things in there. I do love they have a defensive end named Cody Stufflebean. And that kind of Stufflebean kind of tells you what you need to know about this defense. They're pretty good. They're allowing less than 100 yards per game on the ground as a team, so that's pretty solid.
Yeah, they also got a defensive lineman. I don't have his last name in front of me, but his first name is Uso, and I know he's been banged up, and they weren't sure if he'll be back. But I actually met him. He was working with the media relations department when I went out to Manhattan for the women's basketball tournament, NCAA tournament that K-State hosted, and so he was a guy that was that would bring me notes, things like that, and so I met him and I told him, well, hey, in October when you come to Boulder, I said Shadur would probably like it if you don't sack him. And he kind of laughed. He goes, "Yeah, thanks." So yeah, we'll see if he listens to that message or not. But uh, actually, really nice kid. But yeah, and a big kid. So we'll see if he can play. But they certainly have some guys that can play on that defense. And so the Buffs, it's going to be a big test for that offensive line, as it is almost every
Hmm.
week. There's some guys that can get after the quarterback. So the Buffs have got to be on point there. And they played a good game on the offensive line against UCF. Not a great game, and we're not expecting this offensive line to be great, I don't think. But limit him, keep it to 2-3 sacks like it was against UCF, and I think that's a good game.
Yeah, that's the number I think is that you're going to accept. And if Khalil Benson can get back out there, I think the right side of that line is where they're trying to kind of solidify things right now because you've seen improvement out of pretty much every guy on that offensive line. It hasn't always
Yeah,
been linear, but generally, like we were talking about, Brian, it was like with this O line, we know the floor has been risen. Now, is this going to be a group? And we thought it was that was going to get better as the season went along, and that's been the case so far. And if you can have them hitting their stride in November to be in, middle or somewhere in the middle of the Big 12, just in terms of overall competency from their offensive line play, then you're talking about Colorado, maybe being the top candidate to win the conference. I really think
yeah,
it's going to come down to this group and their development the next 7 weeks.
yeah. And on the broadcast at UCF, I mean, Brock Heward, and I can't remember who his partner was, but they kept saying, "Man, if Colorado can run the ball like this, watch out."
Yeah.
Big 12,
Yeah.
and that is such a key if they're able to get that, because when they're able to run the ball, that's how those sack numbers are down. And and again, I talk about the run game. Isaiah Augusta was impressive. Dallin Hayden had some nice runs. Michael Welch had a couple nice runs as well. So they got guys that can do this. And so um, I think if the Buffs rush for 100 plus, I think that's a huge thing for this offense. And if they can get 100 plus, I think there's no doubt they're putting up a bunch of points.
Credit to Savell Smalls too. He's been
Oh
part
yeah.
of them being able to be more versatile in the ground game and do some things that you can't do out of a 10 personnel look. And so this is a former 5-star guy that things didn't work out for him defensively at a couple of different schools. And credit to him for continuing to kind of have that hunger in going over to offense and working his way up to the top of the depth chart. Most of us expected Sam Hart to be the number one tight end, and I know that he had an injury early in camp that kind of maybe allowed Savell Smalls to kind of get that head start in there, but he's taken that and run with it, and I think it's what the last 4 games he's had a catch in too, and he's not gonna with the receiver talent Colorado has. You don't need Savell Smalls catching more than a pass a game, but if he can do that to be a threat in the passing game and also, do what he did at UCF in the run game, that really helps them out offensively.
Yeah, it certainly gives the defense something to think about, and you're right. I think he's been, I don't know about unsung hero, but he's been kind of quietly a guy that's been huge for this offense. And Adam, I was kind of writing it down as I was watching last night. Their runs out of different personnel groupings, and they weren't in 10 very often against UCF. And but they had 4 carries for 6 yards. This is just running backs in 10 personnel. 11 personnel, it was all Savell Smalls. 17 carries, 104 yards by the running backs. You'll take
There
that.
you go.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really nice night for a running back, but that was the group. So yeah, I mean, out of 11 personnel, when they run the football with the running backs, they got success. So and that's where they got their 2 touchdowns, the big runs by Isaiah Augustus. So yeah, they're finding something there.
They are, and the talent has always been there. Running back, even last year, Brian. Like in preseason, we're talking about like how much talent they have. Now, it kind of uh, injuries kind of played into that a little bit in terms of them
Yeah.
not quite having as much talent as they did there. But it was the looks they were running out of and just the scheme more than anything and in the lack of blocking up front that really prevented that. I mean, they really have had talented backs and it's good to see those guys. Alden McCaskill's who I was trying to think of last year that wasn't healthy enough to be what we expected, but they've got, like you said, 3 really talented backs, and now you've got a little bit of momentum and I know Coach Prime didn't like your question when you asked him about offensive linemen enjoying run blocking more, but I really do think there is a mentality you get as an offensive line when you have success running the ball that translates to pass protection. I think you have it's like a mental thing where when you get to be the aggressor sometimes, it puts you in a mindset as a pass protector where even though you're not being aggressive in a lot of those situations, you just have a little bit more confidence, it seems.
Yeah, I think those guys are gaining some confidence. Kareem Harden, by the way, I thought stepped up really well at guard for Khalil Benson in that last game as well. So they've got 6, 7 guys that are in there playing well. Let's get to predictions. What do you think is going to happen on Saturday night?
I think it's going to be a real close football game that's going to go back and forth. I again with Kansas State struggling on the road in Colorado coming back with some momentum. I like them to win this football game, but and folks that hear my score prediction and think that I'm a hater, like do some research on Kansas State. This is a pretty good football team that's coming into Boulder. They are favored by the odds makers. I don't agree with that. I think Colorado should be a slight favorite in this game. I'm going to pick Colorado to win this one 31-30.
Awesome. I like that. And I'm right there. Excuse me. I got 31-28 for the Buffs. So I'm right
Yeah.
there with you. And yeah, this is K-State is a really good football team. I think this is a game that, as I've watched on social media since the UCF game, uh, people can pick apart, or they have been picking apart every win Colorado's had, and you can kind of downplay a little bit. And I've seen people say, well, FCS opponent and CSU and Baylor wasn't that good, and UCF, especially after how they looked in Florida, I don't think they're as good as what we thought. That's what a lot of people are saying. If you win this game, there's no downplaying it. This is one that this will be a legit victory for the Buffaloes. This is a statement game opportunity for the Buffs. Adam, they haven't beaten the top 20 team at home in 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
2009. Remember that game? You were probably there. I didn't cover it, but you probably did. It was
2000 and with Todd Reese out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. Kansas in 2009 was the last time they were number 17, I think. That was
That
the
was a
last.
really close. That was a really close game too. That was
Yeah, I
a
think it
nail
was
biter.
35-31 or something like that. But that was the last time they beat a top 20 team at home. So um, that's your point from earlier. Just get one more point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you get it. You beat a top 20 team anywhere. Just get one more point. I think the Buffs do it. I think it's going to be a really good football game. One that even on the East Coast, you might want to stay up and watch, because I think it's going to be one that's down to the wire. It may come down to, yeah, that 31-28. I don't know if it's Mata hitting a field goal on the last play or whatever it is, but I do think the Buffs, I like them in this one. I think they win their fourth in a row.
We'd get a good modest celebration, I feel like, if that happens. So that'd be
I mean,
fun.
Travis is going to be, right there leading or helping him lead the dance, if Mata hits that game winner. So yeah, it should be a fun one. And Adam will see you out there on Saturday night.
I can't wait.